Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Uncovering Hausa Diaspora panel as part of the Hausa International Book and Arts Festival for 2023. I'm Dima Shami and I'm based in Bristol, but as part of my work, I research Hausa literary print cultures and Hausa literatures and also literatures from Northern Nigeria. So I'm actually really excited to get to talk to so many incredible women who do research and who are artists from Northern Nigeria. So what I will do now is introduce our panelists, and then we can just have a conversation about Hausa identity in the diaspora. So first up, we have Sumaya Fatala, who's a third-generation Saudi Arabian and Nigerian artist. Her passion for visual arts began at the age of 15 when she was experimenting with photography. This sparked her interest in graphic design and multimedia, leading her to pursue a degree at the University of Sharjah. So I will let Sumaya talk more about her herself once we start. And then we've got Bashair Hausawi, who's a Jeddah-based as well Saudi visual artist, and she's interested in experimentation, design, and research. Bashair addresses different topics in her work, especially ones related to the human experience and human identities. Her main inspiration stems from the environment she grew up in and the unconventional materials she uses to collect and resculpt since she was a child playing in her dad's store. She's been awarded grants by institutions such as the Misk Art Institute in Berlin, Hay Jamil, and the Ministry of Culture of Saudi Arabia. She has also participated in local and international art exhibitions such as the Mountains Quiver in Anticipation, Hay Jamil Jeddah in 2023, Next Wave Berlin Art Institute in 2022. And then we've got Suraya Zubair Banu, who's an academic, and her work critically examines gender and sexuality in Africa and its diaspora within the context of a global framework, including international law and the system of the nation state. Her current research project focuses on the role of women's relationships and communities in Northern Nigeria and Northern Nigeria's post-colonial history. She hopes to continue her research and teaching around these subjects in the future. So welcome everybody, and thanks for taking the time to join this panel. So to kick off, I'm just going to ask each of you to talk a little bit about what it means for you to be Hausa or for you to form your identity, like, you know, as a Hausa person or as somebody from Northern Nigeria. Sumaya, do you want to go first since you're at the top of my screen?
Yes, sure, I can go first. So I guess I would speak about my experience being a Hausa person living in Saudi Arabia, and how there's a lot of just trying to figure out a lot of things because since I'm a third generation Nigerian Saudi or Saudi Arabian Nigerian, there are a lot of things from my Hausa culture that were removed as of just the years that we've lived in Saudi Arabia. So I guess right now all I keep doing is trying to relearn, reconnect, and figure the history of my family being here in Saudi Arabia.
Cool. Bashair?
Yes, sure. I actually wasn't focused on Hausa or my identity itself, like in a specific way. But I figured out this because I was interested in the culture and the environment and the tradition and practice that happens like in a daily basis. So when I was like into reading these things, I discovered that my practice or my art is going more towards like the fabric materials, like the African materials. Also being my family here in Mecca, so they are engaging with the people like who's coming from outside Al Hajj, in Mecca every year and Ramadan as well. So I learned more about this tradition and habit in art actually.
Cool. I'll ask you about that a little bit more afterwards. Soraya, do you want to go?
Sure. So yeah, like I mentioned just before we started, I mean, I technically consider myself part of the Fulani diaspora, I think, more so in the Hausa diaspora, even though it's complicated, right? So much of my family is Hausa speaking that I also, you know, I associate with that kind of general identity. When people are talking about Hausa people, I also know that they're kind of referring to me and my family. I would say that um, growing up in the UK, Hausa or sort of the northern diaspora in the UK is very, very small compared to especially the Yoruba diaspora, but the Yoruba and the Igbo diaspora both. And so, you know, when I tell people that I'm Nigerian, they'll kind of immediately sort of assume that I'm Yoruba or something like that. It's often kind of a bit of a surprise if you say you're from the north, and there's always kind of a lot of questions and things like that. So it's definitely a different kind of diaspora experience, I think.
Yeah. So based on that, what can you say about basically being in the diaspora, like in terms of identity? Because as you said, people, when they hear you're Nigerian, they automatically assume you're from the South. So do you feel that, you know, being Northern or, you know, being from the North is kind of a big part of your identity, or is it something that you think about or process when people go like, oh, like the North, where is that type thing?
Yeah, personally, I would say it is a big part of my identity. I'm trying to think. So, I mean, I also grew up in a mixed household, right? So, my dad is Nigerian, my mom is German, and I think my dad really, how should I say, sort of had a very strong concept of what the North is and what Northern values are and what that should look like in a household. And so that's something that I grew up kind of thinking about a lot, or sort of, you know, thinking quite. So yeah, so northernness definitely plays a part in that. I think as I got older, my identity as Nigerian, kind of writ large, actually got stronger as I met more Nigerians also in diaspora here. But I think generally speaking, especially because all of my experiences too are of for the most part, I've barely been to the rest of Nigeria, so it definitely does kind of feature heavily in how I see it.
Definitely. Do you want to talk about that a bit, Sumaya and Bashar? Because I know that, because I'm also in the UK, so I know what Suraya is saying in the sense that there is a huge Nigerian diaspora in the UK. So Nigerian like culture is more mainstream and pervasive. Like if you walk down the streets of London, you'll hear Afrobeats coming from cars. You can find sireh and pounded yam anywhere you go. But what is it like in Saudi Arabia?
Shahid, do you want to go first since you're based in Mecca?
Yeah, it's fine. I think I don't want to say it's a hidden community or hidden place, but it's not like very popular. There's a restaurant here in Mecca and also in Jeddah, like for example, for the Syria food and everything. But I don't think it's like really clear or everyone know about it or everyone are engaging in it. It's like when I used to live in Jeddah. Now I'm living in Mecca. So when I came in Mecca, I could practice this habits like with my family.
Yeah.
But since I'm in Jeddah, as Sumaya said, it's like it's erased or you cannot see it or it's not here actually. But I learned to dig into this, like the identity and everything through art actually, and through my art and the story behind it. And also everyone in the culture or the art scene know more right now about this. Like this came from Africa as a gift for the people who are sitting here. So they know a lot of information and we have this mix between Saudi Arabia, the city that I'm living in, and also Nigeria. Also the craft that's in my family, for example, my mother, they also have some kind of nickname. It's called Hasafi, so because they're doing some kind of job here in Mecca. And also from my father's side, his name also like the nickname is Al Khabari. It's like he's working in the vegetable things. So everything, all of these things like coming out. to the culture and the art.
Yeah, super cool.
Yeah.
Yes. Smeya?
So I guess the reason why I let her speak first is because she's from the West and there's a lot more Nigerian people from that side of Saudi Arabia. On the other hand, I'm based my whole life in the eastern province of Saudi, and there's not really many Nigerians there. So I
Mm,
kind of grew up confused as
mm,
heard like my family at home speaking Hausa, and then I would go outside to school and everyone's speaking Arabic. And then whenever someone would ask me, "So where are you from?" I'd be confused because like my nationality is this and my family is speaking this. So what am I really? You know? And yeah, at some points I was very insecure about it, and I did see a lot of people hiding their true identity even while living in the West. But I guess right now it's a bit more okay to talk about it, or some people are trying to slowly accept who they really are and kind of put it out there for the world to see
mm.
through art or whatever it is.
That's interesting. And I think as well, like that is kind of maybe like a universal experience for people who are like either people who live in diasporas or people who come from like mixed backgrounds and things like that. And it's like a process of negotiation, and everyone finds the ways in which they choose to negotiate those things. So for you, it's your art, and Soraya, I'm going to assume that you do some of that in your work as well. So I don't know if you all want to like talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I can start. Definitely. I mean, I think sort of choosing to do the work that I do was always kind of me trying to, or at least a part of it was me trying to kind of create my own connection to the North and figure out sort of in terms of values, in terms of ideology, in terms of especially kind of what women should be like, what women's relationships should be like. So again, I think when I said that, I feel like I was brought up with a very strong sense of Northern values. I was also brought up with a very strong sense of, what what a proper Northern woman is supposed to be like and is supposed to act like, and all of that. And so it's been a good sort of journey for me, I think, to figure some of that out for myself, to meet more people, to speak to more people, and see that there's a huge variety of ways to be a Northern woman, right? That there's all kinds of relationships as well within that. I think another thing that's been interesting for me, I can't remember, I think maybe Sumaya, you were saying um, something about her being 3 generations removed. And so doing that work to really sort of figure out, to kind of regain that relationship to your roots and things like that. I think that there's something to be said about the fact that kind of as colonized people, there's so much that stands in the way of people kind of getting in touch with their roots anyway, even I think for some Nigerians living in Nigeria. So, I mean, speaking to people through the course of this research about, things like, traditional practices and things like that I think especially, I think people in the northern middle class are actually quite removed from, because again, there's sort of a proper way to be northern, and it's sometimes removed from some of the older kind of Hausa practices and things, if we're talking about Hausa identity in particular. So yeah, I think it's always a process of negotiation, but I guess especially so when you're sort of removed geographically, like we are.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, do you want to give us some examples of, some of the things that people tend to be removed from, or like how class intersects with that, or just some of the things that have kind of like stood out to you, like during your research?
Sure. I mean, so one of the things is, the North is always spoken about as like a deeply patriarchal society, right? That's just the way it is. And people talk about it as though that's the way that it always has been. And then in the process of doing research, I've kind of learned about how sort of integral to political and economic structures women have been, especially like preceding the caliphate. So I watched The Woman King recently, which I had really mixed feelings about, but it was interesting to see, there's this a royal guard of women who were protecting the palace. And, everybody sort of talks about that as, this really exciting thing and this really this incredible example of women being part of also the military structure of the state. And it turns out that actually a lot of the Hausa city-states also had women guards. That this was also part of the kind of the social and political structure that existed then. And so things like that, I've had some conversations about that with some people who were absolutely shocked that that was true. We know about things like Amina of Zazao and all of those queens, that there's actually a rich history of women-led governments, women-led militaries, and women-led markets as well. So women kind of as part of the economic structure. So things like that. Also, spirituality, religion. Again, there's a lot to be said there. And in some ways, because I'm from a Muslim family, I'm possibly not the best person to speak about it. I do think that depending on your background within the North, I think different people have different sort of levels of access to things like traditional spirituality as well. But that's something where I think a lot of, especially middle class that I speak to, are kind of like, yeah, we sort of know it's there, we sort of know it exists, and it kind of it feeds into a lot of even Islamic practice, right? That there's sort of there's an overlap, I think, between traditional spirituality and Islamic spirituality, and things kind of get moved between the two. But yeah, that's again something that I find that people either don't know about or actually don't want to know about, because it's kind of seen as the antithesis of what we think of sort of good northern behavior today.
Yeah, true. That's really interesting. To Sumaya, and then Bashar, or whichever way you want to go, if you want to talk about your work and in more details, and to kind of give us, examples of the things that you do and how that connects to how you negotiate your identity.
So I guess I can start. When did I start? Around 2020, kind of, is when I kind of started to get a bit more visual with my curiosity about my culture and heritage and all of that. And it kind of started with the African print fabrics as well, because they're always around the house. So I was just taking pictures of them here and there. And then it turned into more of a collection of how can I kind of connect fully with the culture through maybe fabrics, music, and the little things that I kind of know about Hausa. So, for example, music, the language itself, although like I know small from everything, but I kind of put it all together in one project, and it's called Semundawa actually, as in like hopefully at some time we return. So yeah, that was basically it. Self-portraits.
Yeah, that's really cool. I don't know if we can share screens, and I don't know if it will. Yeah, but basically, if we can leave some details like afterwards, if you have like an Instagram page or something, and then people can. All right, Sada saying he can do that. Cool. Bashar?
I didn't know that I am doing like African things or practice, I guess. But there's a small story that from that story that happens like in my practice earlier. One of my friends told me like that I think your style is going to the blackness or the African style because you are using figures and something like this. And I didn't know that, so I started to do my research a little bit. And then when I found out that I am doing the same path that the African artist doing or the Hausa or something like this, I think I started to focus more on that, and I felt, I guess, my real identity. You know, when you in a daily life, when you do your hair, you braid your hair, and then you wear this kind of clothes. But in terms of, I think, art, it kind of opens my my inner conversation with myself, I guess. Especially when I did the artwork called Cleansing, it was very clear, like, to me, that this is my path, I guess. And this is something that I am, it's show my true to myself. Before I show it to the world, I didn't know it's like, oh, this is art, or this is something that we can present it in a gallery or in a, you know, in art scene. So I started this with myself first as a self dialogue, and I start to wear the fabric in myself, and I do some kind of video. I didn't show it everyone, like, to the world, but me and myself in my room, take pictures of myself and see how I react with the fabric, for example, or how does that make me feel. I guess it makes me feel maybe safe or secure, I guess. And I used to do the praying by wearing the African clothes. It was very interesting for me. It's like a kind of one person or a whole. Yeah, that's my kind of story about practicing art.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I guess the next thing I'm interested in knowing is kind of, what do you want your art to do? Like, what do you envisage your work or your art doing? And in if you use Soraya, that would be like your work. Yeah, like, what do you see it like achieving?
I hope that it will help to just break the strength of some of the myths that are told about the North, even by Northerners and to Northerners. Again, I feel like, and so my subject is gender and sexuality, right? And so I feel, again, this myth of the patriarchal North and sort of this just being what the North is used to really stifle dissent. It's been used to, you know, tell women who are fighting to end, you know, sexual and gender-based violence, for example, that they shouldn't be doing this, that it's, you know, it's not part of the North normal, right? That it's not part of the northern norms. That they're, you know, they're going against, you know, Arawa values and all of this. I feel like those kinds of arguments can only be made when there's sort of one narrative about what Arawa values are and you know what Northern values should be. And so yeah, I'm trying to push against that, and I hope that that's what the work can achieve.
Yeah, Sumaya, if you want to go next.
So I think because a lot of my work is kind of trying to understand and reconnect and research the history and all of that. So I think one of them is just for me to understand the different things that exist in the culture and reconnect fully, hopefully. And then another thing is a celebration of something that I wasn't necessarily celebrating back in the day. People around me that I still do know until this very day don't necessarily celebrate or are ashamed of. And also kind of letting people here in this region know the stories of our people being in this country.
Can you tell us more about that? So, first of all, like, I guess the history of the Hausa, I mean, as you've experienced it, or as what you have uncovered in you know, in Saudi Arabia, and then also the kind of shame that you were saying that you know that other people feel, and then the kind of need to, you know, integrate socially and kind of like squeeze out those parts of your identity that people don't want to face up with. Like, can you give us examples of that and talk about it?
So I don't think it's necessarily something that comes from, like, it's not a shame that's coming from people from the outside. It's more of like they're trying, I think that some of them are trying to kind of fits into the norms here. And so it's kind of removing bits and pieces of who they really are, you know? So I know people that wouldn't really want to speak Hausa outside because that would be kind of a no-go for them. That's embarrassing to them. And that really does upset me. And I really hope that at some point, like, everyone's just okay with it, you know? I wouldn't say that it's everyone, but that's just some people. Yeah.
Can I add something to what Sumaya says? Because in terms of language, like for example, when we host other people from outside, I don't know, I see this in person, and or we go, for example, to France or any place, they don't want to speak even in English. They just want to speak in French language, and they insist that we just want to speak our language. So Anna, from since I used to be like a child, I wanted to learn this. I don't know any words, but my mother and my father talk this language when they don't want us to know something. For example, like it's a secret between each other. Like we are talking, everyone is talking, and then they talk, just the two of them. And so I was like, what's next? We want to understand. So I think I'm interested to learn more about this language. And also, my grandmother said that you have to learn about this language because sometimes a lot of people here in Mecca comes together and then they speak along and they say whatever they want and we cannot understand. So it's dangerous. We have to know what they are saying in terms of to understand the language.
I've got to say that I had the same experience. My parents were using it as a secret language.
Yeah.
Hausa to them was a secret language. We weren't able to learn, but yani, we do kind of understand now, and we're slowly kind of trying to learn.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's the same story that most people who live outside of their like actual countries have, where it's the language you learn in school and that you speak that everyone else speaks versus the language that your parents speak. Yeah, I mean, I wish that I actually studied Arabic, like written and read in school, in extra school lessons. I didn't take it seriously. Um, but yeah, I mean, in terms of like language and fluency in Hausa, like, is how would you describe like your fluency? Do you think the kind of the process of your works to kind of engage with, you know, whether it's Northern Nigerian, you know, like cultures or like politics or history, or whether it's art, do you find that there is a barrier because a lot of things will be in Hausa and I don't know.
I think for me, kind of, I have that experience because there are a lot of things that for example, songs, I would listen to them and I would like the sound of them and I would be dancing on them, but then I don't really understand what they're saying and it makes me upset. And I'd have to call a friend. I'm like, hey, can you like translate this to me? Because I want to know what it means. Maybe I can use it for my work or something. So yeah, I guess that's mainly it.
Same, I would say I've had that exact experience too. I mean, definitely throughout this PhD, I've had to work so closely with people because my house is rubbish. It's, you know, I can understand bits, but I can't really speak much at all. And I've, you know, been trying to do interviews and things. And so it's definitely limiting. I think there's kind of no two ways around that. It's absolutely limiting, even kind of looking back on some of the conversations being had during the interviews, and, you know, things that I wish that I'd picked up on at the time and I couldn't really, and stuff like that. On top of that, family, you know, there's so many people in my family who only speak Hausa, or possibly some speak Hausa and Yoruba, but depending on what part of my family. So all of my aunts, basically, I've never been able to have a full conversation with, just, you know, that flows. And so stuff like that really saddens me. And yeah, I've been, you know, I do want to learn. I think it's a shame, to be honest, not to be able to speak the language that your family speaks.
Yeah, so I was going to ask another thing about like belonging. So a lot of you have said that a lot of your family members, like they speak Hausa, or they're fluent in Hausa and things like that. So do you feel like even though there is a barrier language, there are other things that you use to kind of feel like you, or like reinforce that sense of belonging? I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but the best thing I can think of is when, you know how they say if you have different personalities in different languages, like you're a different person when you speak English than you are if you speak Arabic, than you are if you speak like Hausa. So that's a kind of way in which your personality might change, or your kind of attitude, or whatever, it changes depending on who you are with. So do you feel like there are specific things that you like, I don't know, like do you have like ways in which you kind of reinforce your sense of belonging to Hausa culture even though you have that language barrier?
I think, I don't know, for me, for myself, I think first through art, and then like when I do my hair, I can feel it. Like do all of my hair, it gives me that feelings of like I'm okay now, I'm very good. And also the clothes, like I buy the t-shirt, I have all the colors, blue and the purple, it's all the color. Also the dresses, even if I'm not going out, but if I wear it or I do something with this, I can feel myself more, I guess, or like I'm belonging to something. It's very original to me. Yeah.
I think for me, I guess with music, weirdly enough, like I didn't grow up listening to Hausa music. I discovered it with my uni friends, and it kind of became a part of first my music life and I guess my work as well, because even in my work I would be using it for example, to take self-portraits. The music is playing and it's kind of giving a feel, and I'm just dancing with the music and you can see the motion of it. Also food, like there are host of foods here that we do have, although some of them are very much tweaked because of the lack of ingredients, but they work and they feel good. And also recently going to Nigeria was really nice because I've never been before, as my family has always been in Saudi, and I was able to like go there for a week and it felt amazing, hopefully for more trips coming.
Can you give us, can you tell us more about the food? Like, you shouldn't have mentioned food because it's the topic I love discussing the most. But yeah, because I find it here as well, like with most either Nigerian foods or even like Lebanese dishes, or, any, like people always have to tweak to kind of make the best out of something. So yeah, can you give us some examples of, yeah.
Okay, let's think. I think I've tried suya in Nigeria and I've tried suya in Saudi, and I think they're completely different. They're two different worlds, but almost the same. I don't know how to explain it, but that's one thing. A few months ago, I discovered that the masa that we eat here in Saudi is completely different from the masa that's the original masa, because we're using a completely different flour. Another thing, what is it? Tanwake. There's a specific flour for tanwake, but I thought that it was regular flour my whole life until one of my friends made it for me and she was like, hey, have it. And I was like, why is it brown? She was like, well, it's meant to be like that. Like, oh, we've been making it differently all this time. So it's just interesting to just see the changes that people make just to be able to eat whatever they used to eat back home, but in a different country because of the lack of ingredients.
Yeah, I know that pain. Soraya, do you have anything that you want to contribute to that?
I was going to say before on the language thing, but kind of I think it speaks to belonging too. That actually, as frustrating as it is, not to speak kind of the language that my family speaks, and not to be able to, move around easily in the north and read Hausa books and things like that in the original language. I do find, or I have found, that like the process of like that phone call to a friend to be like, okay, can you like help me, like what's going on here, like that's special, right? Like that's a kind of belonging sort of that's been, and again, definitely for the last few years, as I've been working with people, Sada, like loads of others who've been just helping me so much. I feel like that has brought its own form of belonging that is special, right? It's kind of like, okay, like you don't know all of this stuff, but in the process of figuring out, it kind of strengthens the bond. So yeah, that's been good.
I'd like to add that, sorry. I'd like to add that it's really nice to see how like your friends that actually know a lot more than you are open to like help you out, and they would like actually sit you down and teach you stuff. So that's also special.
Yeah, I was going to like to say that if it sounds like a lot of people's kind of experience of identity and of culture and of senses of belonging, they happen through other people, right? So like you need other people to kind of have that experience of yourself as, a Hausa person or a you know a northern Nigerian person specifically. So yeah, what is your kind of I would say like social world like, as people living in a diaspora, but also kind of having family and friends and like social networks like that are kind of like all over the world. What does it look like in your daily life?
I think I would speak about what my brother do. I think it's part of it, which is something called mizmar. He's obsessed with this, and he also sell the stick. He made some kind of career from this and sell it to his friend. So every week, I think he comes to Mecca. He lives in Jeddah, and that's he socialize, and that's how he live, like to live and enjoy his life. So this is something in my mind every week since you said that.
Does anyone else want to contribute, or should we move on? Okay. Did you want to say something, Sumaya?
I was just going to say, I can. I mean, I feel like social life. Yeah, I think kind of, I mean, being in the UK, I have some northern friends, but not that many. I think I was kind of lucky. There's one. Sorry?
In London?
Oh, I live in Cambridge, so it's an even smaller pool. Yeah, but like I was lucky that there was one other northern family growing up, and so that was always nice, just to kind of um, just to know that there were others out there. I think kind of growing up though, or as I'm getting older, it's felt easier to sort of pull these different parts of my life together. I think now that because there are so many people moving between sort of the UK and Nigeria, it starts to feel more like one kind of continuous life rather than lots of different lives that I'm trying to fit together that don't quite sort of where there's no overlap. There's more overlap now.
Yeah, against all odds, like, so I'm in Bristol, which is in the southwest of the UK, and I met somebody who lives in Exeter, which is like next to us, and he's from Dutse, which is like, I don't know, like an hour outside of Kano, which is where I grew up from. So he was doing his PhD and he was being supervised by the friend of my line manager. So that's how like we met. And his wife was here and his kids were here and stuff. So it's kind of like, it is very rare, but it does happen. And then what I found is whenever anyone goes back to Nigeria, if I'm going back or if I'm coming, there's kind of like this international network of like illegal moving of stuff, like, oh, please bring me back sire, or oh, please bring back kuli kuli. I'll be like, what do you need? And then people will always want something. and then I'll go to Kano, and then they'll send family members to drop off stuff for me to like bring back and things like that. So it's always like, I find it like not just with like my Nigerian friends, but also with my Lebanese friends, if anyone's going or coming from, and it's like, who's coming from here and can you bring me this and that? So yeah, I think like the social kind of ways that we connect is really important, because you grow, like, I don't know if you if for any of you it's the same, but do you realize that as you grow older you start to like emulate your parents' behaviors that you found maybe when you were young was like embarrassing, like, mom, why are you asking people to bring you food? And then you're like, oh, I do that now.
I agree with this point in terms of doing what your mother and father do. I'm doing it like now every day, maybe because I'm traveling a lot, so I miss them a lot, and I do copy them, everything that they do in their life. I guess I love them more, I guess, now, and appreciate them more.
Okay, so we have 5 or a few more minutes. So I guess to end, I would ask each of you to maybe tell us, where do you want to see your work in 5 to 10 years, and also what do you want to see from like Hausa culture in the diaspora in 5 to 10 years, and then we can end on that.
I think that's a big question. I think so. A very big question.
Okay, well, answer
About it.
whatever you want, or don't answer it if you don't want.
No, I wanted to answer, but I think like I'm not sure what I want actually, but the first thing that I wanted to do is to be honest in terms of my identity. Why do I want to speak about this in the culture scene or in the art scene? Why is it important for me? Is it because I want to say this is me? Or do I want to spread more information or awareness? Like, I'm living here, but I'm doing this. My grandmother comes from outside. They are here. But I am also interested in merging more than one culture. So I think it will always be in my practice, even if it's like art or in my daily life. Like, yeah.
That's lovely. Suraya? You're muted, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just agreeing that is a huge question. I guess, I mean, in some ways, I'm going to repeat myself in saying that I think that there are a few sort of, again, myths about what the North is. That again, that Hausa, for example, is sort of the only real northern identity, or or House of Fulani, even in whatever that kind of is supposed to point to, and the kind of the religious diversity of the north, the ethnic diversity of the north, the gender relations in the north, all of that. So I'm curious to see, not just with my work, but I think there's so many people doing work on these issues at the moment that I think that more and more conversations are going to be had, and I'm looking forward to that. In terms of diaspora, it's I think, I mean, it's nice to speak to people in the Saudi diaspora, because I think it's such a different situation. I think here it's kind of just like, it's facts that the Hausa diaspora, or the northern diaspora, is always going to be a minority in terms of the Nigerian diaspora here. But I do also think that in terms of kind of making more space to talk about, Hausa culture, northern culture, more attention to Hausa literature, things like that. I think there's way more room for that in the diaspora world too. I think so many people living in diaspora are interested in reconnecting or strengthening their relationship with Nigeria as a whole, or with kind of their specific culture or ethnicity. And so it would be nice to see more avenues for that as well.
Thank you. Sumaya?
I guess for me, it's more of like, I usually say that it's kind of like steps that I'm taking because I'm going from like not knowing almost anything into slowly kind of trying to regain my connection with Hausa culture and identity. Um, so I guess right now I'm in the uncovering phase where I'm just slowly peeling the onion kind of thing. Um, Hopefully, I'm able to go back and forth from here to Nigeria at some point and just learn more slowly and be able to like bring it back here to Saudi and implement it in both my art and my life. And hopefully also the family members to kind of introduce them to whatever, I wouldn't say lost, but another word for lost. I'm not sure what that is, but yeah.
No, that makes total sense. Okay, well, I think unless anybody wants to add anything, or is there's something we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about, then please feel free to do that. Otherwise, I think we can bring the session to a close because we don't want to run over like an hour. No?
Always good.
Okay. Well, thank you so much to Sumaya, Bashair, and Suraya for that conversation. It was really interesting, and I hope that we get to meet in person at some point and talk about these things even more in future. But yes, and also thank you, Sada, for organizing it. So yes, thank you, everyone, and